Farmers today are facing rising costs, volatile markets, and extreme weather. The A Better Way to Farm podcast digs into strategies to help you take control of farm inputs and maximize profit so your farm can thrive for generations. Remember to take advantage of our free resources at abetterwaytofarm.com. Now, from America's Heartland, here's your host.
Farmers, here's the hard truth. When we put on too much nitrogen, it doesn't just disappear. A lot of it ends up in our water. And even if things like happening in the Des Moines Waterworks, the system is not entirely our fault, it does come back as being listed as our fault. Do you know who's going to end up paying for that in the end? You and me, all of us. Today, we're going to talk about the overuse of nitrogen, how it hurts your bottom line, and even our drinking water, and what it is that we can do to make that better. Hey, Rod here at A Better Way to Farm, where we increase yields and improve profits. And today, again, what our goal is to make you think. I had the pleasure today to hear a podcast from the Farm for Profit group. Great job, guys. And they sat down with some people who are working, representing basically the Des Moines Waterworks, talking about how it is that they're purifying enough water, taking the nitrates out of the water so that they can give adequate drinking water to 600,000 people. And of course, they take most of their water out of the Raccoon River and out of the Des Moines River. And so the nitrates in there are obviously a bit of a problem. And it's easy for us to sit back and say that, well, what about all the people in the city that are putting way too much nitrogen on their lawns? That's true. I'm not going to deny that, probably. What about all the decomposing dead deer that are here? What about all the decomposing leaves that we have? All of those things are true. But the bottom line is the big target is on us. And I want to talk about why this is important. The coolest thing to me about that podcast day was they sat down and had a conversation. They had a conversation, the people from the Des Moines Public Waterworks and the guys from Farm for Profit just sat down and had a conversation looking for common ground. And there was a lot of common ground. And I commend them because the bottom line is, guys, we have to talk. We have to spend time talking to our urban counterparts, talking to our friends who are also the consumer. We have to get to know them and let them know where we are. And we need to look at what they're doing and try and figure out how we can better understand them. And I want to take some different takeaways today or some different things for you to think about, completely separate from what they said. They had a lot of good ideas, and some of the ideas that they have are good ideas as far as the environment. I'm not sure they're good ideas in regards to you. And you know, my deal is everything that happens in agriculture is good for somebody. The question is who. And my goal is that we can come up with some solutions to this nitrogen deal that are good for everyone. That it doesn't have to be us versus them. As a matter of fact, when we get into us versus them, when we get into either this or that, my experience is no one ever wins. Instead of saying either this or that, how about we say this and that? How is it that we're going to clean up the environment? How is it that we're going to take the nitrates out of the drinking water? How is it that we're going to do the right thing and have the farmers still win from an economic standpoint? As a matter of fact, you guys know we just did the webinar, and it was very exciting to have 230 people on there. I don't know how many people have asked for the replay, probably close to 100, I don't know. And because the whole title of that was How to Survive These High Fertilizer Prices. How is it that we're going to flourish in these times? And you know, one of the takeaways from that, I'm going to digress for a minute. I am amazed at the number of people who have looked at some of our lives on Facebook, who have listened to some of our podcasts, and they are so convinced they want to stay with the status quo. And I get that. I have behind me here 2 computers. This one is my old computer, and this one is my old computer. This one, which has something on it that I want to retrieve, I can't get it to power up, so I'm going to let it charge all night. This one over here, I can get it to power up, and I've been able to get some stuff off of it that I was looking for, but I get it. Change is hard. Why do I still have these? I don't know. Why was I still using that computer long after I should have? Why did I use this one way after I should have? Why did I just now get Windows 11 on a new computer on my desk when I'd been running Windows 7? I'm not proud of that, but the fact is change is hard. And while that deal wasn't hurting anyone else, it was just hurting me. But when I made the change, it made a difference. As we start talking about how to survive these high fertilizer prices, I get a lot of pushback, and it's coming from people who farm, that they're bound and determined that we're going to do it the same old way, that we're never going to change, and that what we're doing is right, and we're willing to die on that hill. And I'm not sure that's a hill worth dying on, because, guys, let's go back and review here. You embrace change, right? Are you using the same planter you were using 40 years ago? No. Are you using the same hybrids you were using 40 years ago? No. Are you using exclusively only the chemicals that you could get 40 years ago? No. You're probably using some of them. We're seeing some of those come back, repackaged, whatever, but we're still looking for new technology. Guys, everywhere in the world, technology has improved. Why do we want to die on the hill of saying we're going to stick our head in the sand over here? And I want to take it away from P and K and the micronutrients that we did the webinar on, and I want to transfer it over, and I want to talk specifically about nitrogen. And I've had some very interesting comments. I'm going to intertwine some of those here as we go through this and talking about some different things that we can do to make things work better. But a lot of the comments that I was getting was they were simply saying, this is how you can do dry broadcast blow and go and make it work better. And they were correct up to a point. For instance, we had someone who come on and they said, look, if you'll just put AMS in and broadcast a few micronutrients, it'll be a more effective broadcast mix. That is true. And they said, if you'll just put on more nitrogen, that will enhance the uptake, especially of phosphorus. That is true up to a point. And then there comes a point where you have too much nitrogen and it reduces the amount of nutrients that you can take in. Adding nitrogen can increase phosphorus uptake. We know using too much nitrogen creates an almost immediate potassium deficiency. So now we have to overuse potassium. There's a lot of things in here. Guys, I could go on this for hours, but I am super excited. Thank you guys for tuning in. We really appreciate your time. But I want to dive in here and talk specifically about this idea of nitrogen. Number one, I want to tackle it from the surviving high fertilizer prices aspect. What does that mean? That means that we are in uncharted waters on how many bushel of corn it takes to buy a ton of urea, ammonia, ammonium nitrate, AMS, whatever it is, DAP, potassium chloride, all of it. It's all at the same place that it takes more bushels of corn than ever to buy a ton of nutrients. So, as we dive in and look specifically at nitrogen, what can we do about that? Well, I think the first thing that we want to do is we want to be judicious. Now, let me back up and talk about the fact Karen and I had a great conversation today. We listened to the podcast together and got to spend a bunch of time together. And one of the things that Karen quickly pointed out was she said, part of the deal, Dad, is that we are out here growing way more corn than we did 10 years ago. A lot more corn than 20 years ago. A lot more corn than 30 years ago. And that's all true. And in an effort to do that, we know we have to put on more nitrogen. So I'm going to assume for right now that we're sticking with the 1 pound to 1 bushel. We're going to start with that. And let's just pretend that's the right idea. It's not. We're going to fix that later. But for now, we're going to pretend 1 pound, 1 bushel. So when we were growing 100 bushel corn, we put on 100 pounds of nitrogen. When we went to 150, 150, and so on. And now we're at the point where we're trying to grow 300 bushel. And what does that mean? It means we're putting on 300 pounds of nitrogen. What's the problem with that? I'm going to get into the use rate later, but here's the biggest problem, and Karen nailed this. We all want easy. We want to smack that easy button and come back and say, hey, we're going to put on 300 pounds of nitrogen, so however many pounds of urea it takes to get 300 pounds of N, that's what we're going to do. However much NH3 it takes, that's what we're going to do. However much 28, that's what we're going to do. We're going to dump 100 gallon of 32% on all at the same time. What's the problem with that? If you go with the studies of Blackmire and some of the others who have been premier researchers in this, guys, the situation is this. We know that soil can only hang on to about 10 pounds of actual nitrogen for each CEC point. per application. Now, that doesn't mean you can't make multiple trips. And I got people say, there's no way I can make multiple trips. I get that. We're going to talk about that in the future here too. But the fact is, if we're going to over-apply, we're going to lose nitrogen. And what happens? Number one, that's not how we survive high fertilizer prices. I love the people that come to me and they go, I would be willing to bet $10 to a donut that sometime in the month of October, I will see people pulling anhydrous on. And when they do that, the most common thing that I hear is, well, we're going to lose some, but we just put on an extra 40 pounds because it's cheap. And so if we lose that 40 pounds, it's okay. Well, guys, we just threw away those dollars. We're openly saying this is gone. We're never going to get it back. And we willingly did it to ourselves. Why? Why would I want to do that? And the fact is, guys, I'm not going to get into it on this one, but you can get to some of our other podcasts, and we talk about the expected loss of fall applied nitrogen based on geographic area, whether it be southern Iowa, northern Iowa, all the way up into North Dakota. And anhydrous that goes on in October, even in North Dakota, suffers significant loss. And that's well documented. And then we have people come back and they say, well, I was talking to my consultant. He said we put on that fall applied gas and, it stayed warm a little longer than we thought it would. And then we had it warmed up early in April and we had quite a bit of rain. And he thinks we probably lost some. So we probably better come back in and put some more on. There's a word for you, more on. Not two words, one. Think about what you're doing there, guys. The fact is this. We don't want to lose any. We don't want it going away. Why? Because it's dollars out of our pocket going down the Des Moines River, going to the Gulf of Mexico. Why do we want to do that? Why would we not want to manage this? Here's my goal. Every pound of nitrogen you put on, to the best of our ability, goes into your corn plant, goes into your wheat crop, goes into your grain sorghum, whatever it is that you're growing. Why? Because that's an investment. Here's a little question for you. What is the ROI on the nitrogen that goes out your tile line and down the river? None. Correct. It's zero. It is just a net loss. Why do we want to do that? Guys, I know I'm being a little harsh, but the fact of the matter is we need to come to grips with some things. Grip number one, if we don't regulate this, they're going to regulate us. You get up into Minnesota, there's already areas up there where they're heavily regulating how much nitrogen they can put on, when, and what form. My experience indicates if I don't self-regulate, someone else regulates it for me, and I always hate how it is that they do that. So how about we self-regulate and save that? So we know that when we put on more than 10 pounds per CEC point, that it's gone, that it runs away. So now we know we can come back and do multiple shots. And I get people that go, well, A, I don't have the time. B, my fields are too narrow, too wet, too crooked, too whatever. I don't want to do it. But the fact is, guys, once we apply over the 10 pounds, we're losing it anyway. Why put it on there? Here's a test I would ask you to run. Take the nitrogen rate that you're running right now. Don't use anybody's additive, and just go out and do strips. Your rate, and then strip it and go 40 pounds less or 20 pounds less and strip one entire field and see what happens. You convince you of what you're capable of doing. And I know there's going to be people come on here, they're going to comment and they're going to argue about it and they're not going to want to do it. And they're going to say, that's fine. If you're happy with where you are, that is excellent. We're glad for you. However, I am going to ask that you consider doing this, even if you're happy, because we're all going to be unhappy if we don't reduce the nitrates going into the drinking water. And quite honestly, do you want your kids drinking water with nitrates in them? Do you want your grandkids drinking water with nitrates in them? Absolutely not. So what are we going to do? Well, I had one of the guys reach out today and he goes, man, if you'll just put on AMS and some micros in there, all your uptake will improve. That is true. Again, up to a point. But too much of anything becomes its own problem, becomes self-limiting, and limits other things. As we start looking at this, guys, let's talk about some alternatives. The number one thing I keep hearing people about, they talk about putting in bioreactors. What's a bioreactor? You take your tile lines, you get to the end of the tile line, you dig a great big hole, and you fill it full of wood chips. And it sequesters the nitrogen. Does it work? I don't know. I'm sure it does. I believe very strongly that they're sequestering those those nutrients, that they're sequestering that nitrogen. But my question is, what's in it for the farmer? What's in it is it keeps us from getting regulated. It keeps us from messing up the drinking water, but it's still money lost. I still believe, rather than spend all the money to put in a bioreactor, rather than take the time to dig the hole and put in the wood chips, and then every so often you're going to have to change that out. And then my question becomes, what are you going to do with those wood chips? That's going to be interesting also. But when we go the other direction and we just use it judiciously, now we're getting somewhere. Guys, think about this. What if you could figure out how to grow your corn on 0.6 or 0.7 pounds of nitrogen per bushel? Because you can. We have people doing it consistently. And the fact of the matter is they've made some changes. There may come a point in time when we have to either add staff, or maybe, as I talked to one of my friends over in Illinois, he just flat said, I'm going to give up, those are the cuss words of an American farmer, I'm going to give up a few hundred acres, and I'm going to focus on this 3,000 or 4,000 that I have left, and I'm going to give up the most marginal ground, which I'm making the least amount of money on, and I'm going to focus on making more money on what I have because I'm going to do a better job. Guys, again, this is respectfully. I'm asking you to consider these things. You do what you want to do, but there's a certain number of you, and you're saying something has to change this year. And the something that's got to change is how we manage our inputs. That's the number one thing. Can we market better? Maybe. Can we do some things, cut back on some expenses? Yes. But the number one thing we can do is control the controllables, and not doing it exactly the same way and just throwing dollar bills out the window is the first thing that we need to take a look at. And so how are we going to do that? Number one, in my estimation, guys, and some will not like this, I believe that the days of fall applied nitrogen are over. Okay? They've already died. We haven't had the funeral, and some people aren't willing to admit that yet. I know it spreads out the work for the retailers so they don't have to mess with it in the spring. I know it makes the farmer sleep easier because that's one thing he can check off that's done. And we can continue to do that, but we can't stick our head in the sand and deny that we're suffering loss, and it's probably massive loss. And guys, rather than argue about this, I would encourage you fall applied nitrogen, that's grand. Go out next spring and take nitrogen test. Take a 0 to 6 and take a 6 to 18. And when you do it, check both nitrate and ammonium and see how much is left. And then say, where did all of that go? Because here's what I'll tell you. Nitrogen that was applied that isn't there April 25th isn't going into the corn plant. It done gone. It gone down the Mississippi and it's out of here. And so that's the first thing we can do is we can give up the fall applied. The second thing we can do is be judicious in the spring and put on the amount that's 10x RCEC, knowing full well that we may have to come back. Guys, don't lose sight of this. You can grow 300 bushel corn on 210 pounds of nitrogen. And a lot of you guys have a CEC of 21 or 22. You can do that. Now, I'm going to suggest if you're going to front load your N, that you need to take a look at a stabilizer. In my own brain, one of the things that we can do is I believe that urea applied over the top and left unincorporated is not a good management procedure. I believe we really run the risk of it running away. And yes, I know there are stabilizers, and those stabilizers, read the label good, guys. What does it say? Provides you with somewhere between 10 and 14 days protection. Once that time is up, it's gone. So what's your bet when you buy those stabilizers on that urea that you leave on top of the ground? That it will not rain for either 10 or 14 days, but because that's when you have the protection. If it rains on day one, you don't need it because it took it down into the soil, right? If it rains enough, your worst nightmare is it rains 1/10 of an inch and then it just volatilizes to who laid the rail. But it doesn't rain for 10 or 14 days. And then it does rain on the 10th or 14th day. That's where that product really pays its way. Those stabilizers that are designed to protect urea from volatilization. What happens if it doesn't rain for 3 weeks or 4 weeks? We have no protection after. It depends on which one, but day 10 to day 14. That's the fact of the matter. We know that that's the way that it works. When we start looking at some of the other stabilizers, there's some stabilizers out there that actually do work because they're an indiscriminate killer of all the bacteria. It's a bactericide, and it just smokes all those bacteria. And so they stop the nitrogen that's in the soil from converting from ammonium into nitrate. And nitrate is how it runs away from us and goes off into the groundwater, right? And those work. There are some other stabilizers out here that actually don't kill anything, but they do some enzyme blocking, and they keep the nitrosomonas from converting the ammonium into the nitrate form, and therefore we get a yield increase two ways. Number one, we don't get as much nitrate, so it doesn't run away. Number two, we know that corn plants would really yield best. They prefer a 50-50 mix of ammonium and nitrate in. And so the longer we can hang on to that ratio, the better off we are. A corn plant will take in pure nitrate. That is a fact. It will waste energy converting part of it back into the ammonium form. That is also a fact. And so there's some things there that we think that we can take a look at that hopefully that we can make better. And guys, I'm not here trying to get wound up on be a tree hugger, so to speak. But I am here saying I don't want my kids drinking water laced with nitrate. I don't want them getting sick. I don't want to see all of the health problems that come with that. I am here saying that if we don't take care of this, they're going to regulate us, and we are going to lose, because regulation always goes too far. All right? And so we know that. I am here saying that this is a financial matter for you, because if we can grow 300 bushel corn on 210 pounds of nitrogen, or even 180, which is very doable, as opposed to growing 300 bushel corn on 300 pounds of nitrogen, think about the dollars that you save. Saving that 100 pounds of N is going to save you what, 40 or 50 bucks probably this year per acre, and getting the same yield. Guys, I am asking you respectfully to consider this. I want to give another shout out to the boys up at Farm for Profit and to the people who were there representing the Des Moines Waterworks. Thank you guys for sitting down, having a conversation, and talking about what we can do. Talking about how do cover crops play into this. Talking about how riparian strips at the edge of the field are a good idea. Talking about how the bioreactors can help. And if we are going to continue to get bent on overusing nitrogen, those bioreactors are definitely going to become something that's going to be implemented, maybe even forced on us. I don't know. But my point is that's all avoidable, and it's in your hands. But guys, I'm just asking you, think about what you're doing. You're going to run the combine this fall. You're going to sit there. You're going to have a lot of time. Some of you with the auto steer, your hardest decision is, do I eat all my lunch at 10 o'clock or do I wait until 11:30? And while you're doing that, perhaps what you would like to do is you would like to do some thinking about how am I going to do better next year? How is it that I can make the world a better place? How is it that I can leave this farm better than I found it? How is it that I can make more money per acre? We're not here to have an argument. We're not going to respond back and try and get into it. If you want to put on fall applied anhydrous, go in peace. Have fun. That's great. If you want to be using 1.4 pounds of nitrogen to grow a bushel of corn, that's fantastic. We're not here to argue, and we're not here to shame. We're not here to judge. But if you're one of the people that's sitting there going, hey, this resonates with me, I would like to cut my nitrogen bill. I would like to reduce my applied nitrogen by 50 pounds. Show me how. We'd like to do that. Guys, there are worse things than doing a split shot. We can go out, if we got a CEC of 12, I do. We can put 120 pounds on the first time, and we can go back and put on up to 120. I have no reason to put on 120 the second time. Why? Because I can't grow 300 bushel corn where I'm at. I don't have the soil for it. But the fact of the matter is, overusing nitrogen isn't going to make my corn any better. As a matter of fact, there's a lot of studies showing the overuse of nitrogen cuts yield. And we talked about that on a previous podcast. There was a lady, a farmer up in Minnesota, who did some interesting work on that. And I think she's continuing to follow up. But guys, overusing N cuts yield. It cuts profit. It contaminates the groundwater. And all in all, it's doing nothing to make our life better. So I just want to encourage you guys, take a look at doing the right thing. Why? Because on that desk pad in big red letters, it says, it's never wrong to do the right thing. Let's go do the right thing.
Only 3 field days left this year. September 10th in Chamberlain, South Dakota, September 12th in Martville, New York, and September 13th in Milton, Iowa. Don't miss your chance to learn how to cut costs and boost profitability. Text Field Day to 641-919-5570.
We appreciate you tuning in. We thank you for giving us your time, and we look forward to getting back to you next week with another idea or two to kick around and think about. And we really do hope you're having a better day.